Well, here we are, the long-awaited, much-anticipated Monday Morning Quarterback. We're back together again. I hope you're doing well on this absolutely gorgeous Monday morning here in the township. If you're out of rhythm with the Monday Morning Quarterback, I know I am a little bit. Bible, journal, and of course, I have worshiped yesterday and heard the message so that we can talk about it. Let's dive right in. We're looking at the doctrine of justification, which is, I know it sounds kind of heady and like theological jargon, but it is so important that as followers of Jesus Christ, we understand what it is that we believe and what God has done for us. And so I thought, toward the end of the summer, wouldn't it be wonderful if we can just do some good, solid theology together and think about how that connects with our experience? And yesterday, we kicked off looking at some of Paul's letters. I'm looking at my board right now. We'll hit Galatians this week and then 1st and 2nd Corinthians 2 following weeks, and that'll take us through that doctrine. Appreciated some of the feedback I got yesterday. Someone mentioned when I was talking about the Biltmore estate that not only did Biltmore build that for the benefit of others, but also he built a spur off the railroad so that the workers could get to the construction site and the materials could get there. And so he also provided a way for his guests to get there, which I thought was interesting. And that's what God does for us. Not only does he invite us to the great banquet, but he provides a way for us to get there. And what is that way? Well, you know the answer. Jesus Christ, of course. Okay, Ephesians chapter 2. Let's go ahead and dive right in, the first two verses. When you see a picture of a group and you are in the group, who is the first person you look for? I mentioned it yesterday. Is that true for you? Do you look for yourself? I know I do. Often not hard to find. There's usually a shine coming off the head in a group picture, but we do. We think about ourselves. We love the sound of our name. And he begins this by just saying, you. And I often say the Bible's not written about us, but it's written for us. And I think that's important to understand, that he is addressing you and me in this context. And we began by saying there are four different things that Paul's going to touch on, four different concepts. Who we are, our identity, what God has done for us, what God is doing in us, and what God is doing through us. And I just want to kind of go through that again with you as we look at the passage. And so, as for you, you were dead in your transgressions and sins. And we talked about the image of spiritual death. And did that resonate with you? Because I think often we hear in conversation that we need to be more enlightened, or we need to be stronger, or we need to be more focused. And those things all might be true. But if we are relying on ourselves to be able to relate to God on our own, we're going to miss that because we can't. We are what Paul refers to as spiritually dead. Dead people cannot become more enlightened. Dead people cannot become more motivated. Dead people cannot become stronger because they are dead. That's the image that Paul wants to make sure we understand, that there is nothing we can do on our own to justify ourselves before the holy, righteous, and pure God of the universe. And so he's just reminding the Ephesian Christians, you are dead in your transgressions and sin, and that is true for you and me as well. And I know that's a tough concept because it sounds so harsh, but it just makes sense to me. I mean, I've lived too long, 57 years in this body. I know how flawed it is and how broken it is. And so he goes on to talk about transgressions and sins. And we mentioned yesterday, transgression, step across a line, sin, miss a mark. And that is just true for us. And so again, as we're thinking about our identity in Christ, who we are, he says that we followed the ways of this world and the ruler of the kingdom of the air. So he's helping us understand our relationship to this planet, this world where we are. We kind of go along with the flow. We sort of meander, just kind of lemmings heading off the cliff in many cases. Followed there is the same word as I mentioned for meander, just kind of knocking along. and going with the flow, and I can relate with that. Can you? I mean, are there times in your life when you're just like going with the flow, not even thinking about what it is that our culture is asking us to do, or to think, or to believe? I get that. And then, of course, the ruler of the air, that's an allusion to Satan. And I didn't point out yesterday, I think it bears pointing out, that he has some authority here. He has some power here. He is a ruler here. We might not like that, but I think that's true. Not hard for me to believe as I read the newspaper and look around what's going on in our culture. I mean, I was reading about these murders and these shootings in downtown Cincinnati. Just in one of the points that was being made by, I can't remember if it was a political person or law enforcement, was that these are not crimes related to like drug trafficking. These are crimes related to conflict between individuals, and they don't know how to handle this conflict in any way other than violence. And we just see that all around us, don't we? So it's easy for me to understand that who I am, I'm living in this world. Sometimes I just go with the flow, and there's a power at work here that is greater than any power that I have on my own. So what do? He has set up this situation for you and me. Well, go ahead and read Ephesians 2, verses 4 and 5. Go ahead and stop the video and read that, and let's look at what God is going to do for us. All right, start it back up. What'd you see? Well, he begins in verse 4 by just pointing out, again, who we are. We're living among all these folks. We're one of them. We're gratifying the cravings of our sinful nature. We're objects of wrath. So he just reinforces what we know to be true about ourselves. And then he says, but here's what God has done for you and me. But God. And I think those are two of the most beautiful words in the entire Bible, because we are in a hopeless situation. I mean, dead people can't do anything to fix or change their condition. They can't. But God has in Jesus Christ. And we learn about God's nature and attributes here. What is God? He is rich in mercy. Do you see that? And also, he loves us greatly. And because of those two things, and you know the difference between mercy and grace, right? Let's just do it together. Mercy is when God withholds what we deserve. We deserve punishment, God withholds it. Grace is when God gives us more than we deserve. It's a gift. God is rich in mercy. He is patient. He's long-suffering. And God is willing to forgive, even when we don't deserve it. Because again, we're objects of wrath. He loves us, and he has great mercy. And so he has made us alive with Christ. In other words, you're spiritually dead, not anymore, not any longer. Because of what God has done for us, we now have life with him. And when did he do it? And I pointed this out yesterday. I think it's important to get square in our minds about this, because often we think God is not going to express his mercy, grace, and love until I do something first, right? We want to be in control. We want to initiate. If I meditate more, if I do more good deeds, maybe God will approve of me. No. When did he do it? Do you see that at the end of 5? Even when we were dead in our transgressions and sins, God has made us alive. And I shared yesterday that this is basic Christianity 101, basic theology. It's also why I'm a Christian, because I see no other way to enter into a relationship with God on my own apart from Jesus Christ. I don't see any way to do it. And so that's why I'm a Christian. That's why I'm a believer. That's what God has done. So what has God done for us? He's made us alive. Then we moved on, verses 6 and 7. Go ahead and stop the video and give those two verses a read. All right, start it back up. What is God doing in us? What do you see here? He raised us up with Christ. And we pointed out yesterday, raised is past tense. So what is he doing in us? He is uniting us with Christ. He has seated us with him in the heavenly places. Seated with is the same as being united with. we are now joined with Christ. When God looks at you and God looks at me, what does he see? He sees Jesus Christ because we're united with him. Key point to understand. We are told elsewhere in the New Testament that because of what God has done for us, we dare to approach the throne of grace with confidence. How can we be confident to go in front of God? And when I say confident, I don't mean arrogant or cocky, because we're going to see something about boasting here in a moment. Confidence is, I can now do this, and I know I can do this, and here's why. We are confident to enter into a relationship with God because we've been united with Jesus Christ. And I used the image of a wedding or a marriage yesterday, just thinking about how in a marriage, when one spouse suffers, the other suffers. When one spouse does something embarrassing, which, by the way, happens occasionally at my house. Amy Jo never embarrasses me, I don't think. I should say rarely. But I think I embarrass her a lot. She might be embarrassed if she's watching this Monday morning quarterback right now. But if I do something that's embarrassing to me personally, she's embarrassed. Why? Because we are united in marriage. You and I are united with Christ. And so that's what he is doing in us. He's uniting us with him. And then I love this. He does this for us not to show how awesome we are. Do you see that? But what? To show the incomparable riches of his grace. So now he's rich in mercy and he is rich in grace. So again, our salvation is for his glory. Isn't that amazing? To show the riches of his grace. And of course it says expressed in his kindness to us. And I love that. I had an old fella in our church in Louisville who we used to invite to pray in church gatherings, and he would always thank God for his kindness. And I'd never really thought about that when I was addressing God, but God's just kind to us. And I love that image, don't you? Great way to go through the day, knowing that God is kind. And his disposition toward us is not anger, bitterness, sadness. We might grieve God, and God, of course, suffers with us when we suffer. But his overarching disposition is one of kindness to you and me. And the leap we made homiletically, which means the leap we made in terms of interpreting this for us today, is the image of being secure. And I feel called and led to do what I can as a pastor here to make sure that our congregation feels secure. Secure in our status before God. Secure that we can take risks and that we can make sacrifices because God is in control, because he's kind toward us, and he has united us with Christ. We don't need a bunch of insecure people running around this place. And I put that, what'd you think about that list of the 5 attributes or habits of insecure people? I thought that was kind of interesting. So that's what he's doing inside of us. He's uniting us with Christ. And then I even, let's go ahead and look at 8 and 9 too. We're almost done, but I think we just need to read it. So go ahead and read verses 8 and 9. All right, start the video back up. Hopefully you stopped it. If you didn't stop it, read it and then come back. All right, verses 8 and 9. I mentioned yesterday, for it is by grace you have been saved through faith. Basic understanding of the gospel. God has given us his grace. He's given us the gift of Jesus Christ. We receive it by faith. And therefore, we enter into this relationship that we call salvation. That's what it is. So if anyone ever asks you, well, now what do you believe? I believe that by God's grace, I have been saved into a relationship with him, and I have received that through faith, and I believe and trust him. There you go. Boom. It's the gift of God so that no one can boast. We can't feel sanctimonious or self-righteous. We didn't do anything. We were dead. God's done it for us, right? And I hesitated yesterday to use the image of plagiarism. It's a strong word, but that's what Gladwell was accused of doing. If you don't remember from yesterday, the book Tipping Point, which I think is interesting because I love sociology. I love that kind of stuff. And I just devoured that book. And then I learned that he was using someone else's work and research and not citing that and crediting that person with that. So plagiarism is a tough word, but that's technically what he was doing. And the point I wanted to make was when you and I become self-righteous and boastful and arrogant, we are taking credit for something we didn't do. God has done the work, and we have received what God has done. Therefore, what he says, so that no one can boast. It's the gift of God. So finally, what is God? Who are we? What's our identity? Dead in our sins and trespasses. What has God done for us? He has made us alive. What is God doing in us? He has united us with Christ. He looks inside your heart and mind. He sees Jesus Christ. And finally, one last thing. Verse 10. Go ahead and give it a read. Stop the video. Start it back up. What is God doing through us? Good works that he has prepared in advance for us to do. And we use the image of Vanderbilt's Biltmore as a masterpiece, just as a way of teeing up this last passage. And I know you could probably see it coming 2 minutes into the service, or into the sermon. But the word for workmanship is the word poema. Makes us think of a poem or poetry. We are God's workmanship. Another translation of poema is masterpiece. That's who you and I are. We look in the mirror. I don't look like a masterpiece at all. But when God looks at you and me, he says that you're my workmanship. And I think that's a strong image to bear in mind. And I have made you my masterpiece because I got some things I want you to do. And you know what? I've already prepared those things in advance, those good works. And so one of the things that we do when we pray is, God, help me to see what this poem you have created is supposed to do. So if you've got a journal, I sometimes jot down in my journal, where do I see God calling me right now? What's he asking me to do? What are these good works he has prepared in advance for me? And I'm at a point in my life in the late 50s now, where I'm wondering, okay, God, what is it for this season of my life that you're calling me to do? And who are you calling me to be? That is our first week of Justified. We actually did Isaiah 43 and kind of teed that up back in July. So next week again, Galatians 3, verses 10 through 14. I hope you have a great day, and look forward to seeing you on Sunday, or just knowing you're with us online. So you take care. Bye for now.